The Committee of the Whole is called to order. I remind my colleagues that the Committee of the Whole was called specifically to discuss and ask questions on the amendment that was proffered by Senator Amanda Shelton. So keep your questions to that amendment. We will not be discussing anything further than that. Anything else, it will be discussed after the panel has been dismissed. I will now ask the Sergeant Arms to call the panel in, the Guam Election Commission folks. Please call them in. We'll be discussing Bill number 330-35 COR as substituted. On the floor. And I will ask the Sergeant Arms to please swear them in. Just thank you, Sergeant Arms. I'll now ask, we'll open the questions unless, Senator Amanda, would you like to recite your amendments so that we know specifically what the questions will be that will be asked of the panel? And I'd like to also recognize the panel members. If you could please identify yourself, ma'am, starting with you, the Executive Director.
Hi, si Maria Pangilinan, Director Election Commission Guahan. To my right is Legal Counsel Vince Camacho, Legal Counsel for Guam Election Commission. And to the left of the Honorable Senator is, not Senator, but his name is Mr. Tom San Agustin as well. Sidus Masi.
Thank you. Senator Amanda, if you would just
Sidus
state
Masi,
your
Mr.
amendment.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Election Commission for being here today. The amendment is on line 11, page 2 of the bill, to amend Section 2 to read, Section 2, permitting absentee voting for all qualified voters, notwithstanding 3 GCA Section 10101, any qualified voter of Guam may vote in the 2020 primary and general elections during the 30-day in-office absentee voting period as provided for in 3 GCA Section 10107. And then to add, notwithstanding the Administrative Adjudication Law 5 GCA Chapter 9 and Guam Procurement Law 5 GCA Chapter 5, the Guam Election Commission may expand in-office voting for the 2020 general election to prevent large congregations by creating satellite voting centers in no less than 3 voting districts no later than 30 calendar days before the 2020 general election date.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. I'd ask the members, you'll be allowed 2 rounds of questions, no more than 5 minutes, not including the response. Do I have any of my colleagues that would like to pose a question to the panel? And I think we started out with Senator Therese or Senator Sabina. Do you have any questions, Senator Sabina? None? Senator Therese, do you have any questions for the panel?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question would be, is there any, if we were going to try to implement voting centers prior to the general election in November, do we need to waive the procurement law in order for you to obtain these centers, these locations?
Senator, we don't know what's available. So depending on what's available, we don't know which procurement process we may need to use.
Right now, do you procure voting centers, or are you able to use the schools, for example, for free?
As far as I can see, Senator, I think the schools are going to go in session for the general, during the general. So if they're available, that may be an option.
But your regular voting centers for the general election are at the schools, right?
No, not necessarily.
Oh, where are they? I mean the voting booths, not the voting, not the new voting centers, your voting places.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
On election day,
Yes.
the polling sites will still be at the schools.
Okay, but for a voting center, you would need, according to this amendment, a 30-day lease or something, a building available for 30 days straight,
Yes.
and you're not sure whether you would need, you can't follow the regular procurement code in order to obtain that?
We don't know, I don't even know what the cost would be to rent something, to rent a space for about 30 days.
All right, no, my question is whether we need to waive the procurement law, or can you follow the procurement law in order to obtain whatever space you determine is available at that time?
One of the driving forces with the timing is dependent on how much it's going to cost, about how much roughly it's going to cost. So I know how much it's going to cost for an annual lease, but I don't know how much it's going to cost for a month lease. And if it's under $15,000, we just go out and get 3 quotes.
Okay. All right, and would you be able to do that before November?
Thank you for that question, Senator. The timeline as it stands right now to include a primary election gives the Election Commission exactly 4 days from the certification of the primary election to mailing out UOCAVA ballots. The strict answer is no.
All right. You had discussed voting centers as an idea that has been used in other places to disperse the one-site crowds, right? But so it sounds good in theory, but you're saying we might be short on time, or you've got 4 days between the primary and when you would have to get that ready?
So to try to get this body to visualize what the commission is up against, okay, we have, one of the primary things that we have to do in the short span of time is get a ballot out within 4 days.
Oh.
So that prohibits the Guam Election Commission from doing anything else in terms of having a primary and having a general election at this time. Yes. And there are other issues that we need to, that we have coming up with us.
Okay. Just to go over the timeline then. So 30 days prior to the November election would be early October, like first week of October. You'd have to be running in these voting centers, right, according to the amendment. And so in order to set that up, you would have, you're saying, from the primary, because you're busy between now and the primary, so from the primary, which is end of August, so you would have the month of September to try to set those programs up. And okay. And the other question is, have you thought about it all if you were required to stand up additional voting centers, these 30-day voting centers, where they might be placed? Have you thought where would be the ideal places to have these? Which precincts, or where would you put them on Guam?
Okay. Since March, April, and May, the team has been looking into it, and we've talked about vote centers before in public. Based on what we have found out, one of the pieces of information that we'd like to share is that across America, something that we looked at was for 50,000 voters, 1 vote center. In that regard, it would be, the best place would be, and again, to keep the security of the ballots, cast ballots, the ideal place would be right inside the building,
What building?
GCIC.
Your office, you're saying, your building, where your
Yes.
office is?
And
Okay,
we would need additional space.
I see. Is there anything that prevents the Election Commission right now from adding additional polling places?
No, ma'am.
So you could divide up, for example, in Jotnia we have 3 and it's divided alphabetically, and you could divide the last alphabet range into 2 if you thought you needed to.
So that's changing out the numbers in the precincts. So yes, there's a process to that, and there is inside the code. The board is able to do that at this time.
Oh, okay. All right. If you were going to do voting centers, would you need additional personnel compared to the personnel you're planning to hire, the 150 plus the 30 more?
Absolutely. And Senator, we would need time to train them. We would need time to train them, which means that would take time away from the preparation of the primary and general election of the 14 employees at GEC. So instead of the 14 concentrating on the primary and general, we would have to ask them to spend time putting together the vote center.
All right. Okay. How long does it take you to train, how many employees would you estimate you would need for 3 voting centers operating for 30 days?
Senator, first we have to train ourselves because we know how to keep the sanctity and the security of the ballot right inside our offices. We don't know how to do it outside of the office or outside of the election return center. So first off, we must train ourselves on how to figure, and for us, the biggest thing is the sanctity and security of those ballots. If it's truly a vote center, it would be, voters will cast their ballots, not in envelopes. Voters will cast, if it's like truly a vote center, the way a vote center operates in America, they would just cast their ballots in ballot boxes.
Like our polling places?
Exactly like a
Okay.
polling place.
But they would be transmitted at the end of the 30 days to the counting
Ma'am,
place?
we'd have to reconcile daily.
Oh,
We
Okay.
have to reconcile daily. And we cannot open those ballot boxes until election return center is open.
oh. Okay.
Senator, may I?
Sure.
Once there's a cast ballot in a ballot box, the Guam Election Commission is required to have security there. Hence, GPD is always at the polling sites as when the election, when election is going on. Yeah. And with regard to we have processes in place, ma'am, where there's a dual custody of transfer of the ballots. So if we're at 3 different sites, we take the ballots out of GEC, 2 of us have to go with it, 2 of us have to go there. There has to be at least 2 different people there to turn over the custody, and vice versa at the end of the night, only after reconciliation.
How long does it take to train the polling workers you're expected to hire?
For the precinct officials, or
Yes.
for precinct officials, We normally do a 3-hour training, and then we will give them a handbook, and they ask, we are available to answer any questions after we send them off after the training.
All right. The other day you said something about 6 days a week.
Oh.
Did you mean your staff is doing training for 6 days a week, or what?
No. Remember, we have to train 335 people. So training sessions are going on 6 days a week because the maximum number of people we have to train in a training room is 25.
Oh,
So we have training sessions going on.
okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Therese. Senator Moylan, you want a question, and you're followed by Senator Luis Muñoz and then Senator Torres. Okay? Senator Moylan, do you have any questions, sir?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Maria, for your explanation. That was very helpful. The amendment that we're discussing for this purpose has already been adopted into the bill. So the changes that were made to this amendment, we changed the word from shall to may. Maria, you expressed that adding the 3 voting districts, there is not enough time. That's correct? Is that-
For this 2020 general election, there is not enough time.
Okay. And this amendment specifically says 2020 general election. So this amendment won't be effective in the future for further elections if we were in that situation for this
Senator?
situation. Yes.
Vote centers came out early in the COVID time. So we started exploring that. The staff and I started exploring that as early as March. All right? So as we came closer to today, we were still looking at it very closely. Should there be no primary? If there is no primary, a vote center for the general election may be feasible.
Would you like her to repeat that one more time?
Yes.
The last part?
Please.
If you can please repeat the last part there about the primary and general.
Okay. With the primary, it is not feasible. If the primary is canceled, the 2020 primary election is canceled, there may be time to look into a vote center for the 2020 general election.
Thank you for that. And if there is a primary, then this can't be done, right?
We're not saying that elections are very technical, but what it takes to run an election, there's lots in detail. So the staff of 14, that's really difficult to transfer that knowledge to brand spanking new people that have never ran elections. That's a difficult task to take.
Thank you. Along that line is my final question. For Attorney Camacho, then, with the wording in this amendment is may expand, right? So with the situation where if there is a primary and you may expand, understanding all the training that is necessary if there is a primary, and Guam Election Commission decides not to have the 3 voting districts, would you feel it's okay to use the word may to say, we're not going to do it because it's just not enough time for us? You won't, or would you feel comfortable in advising GEC the word may means we can or we may or we may not. You'll be okay, GEC, if you decide not to, if there's a primary. If you kind of get what I'm trying to say, I hope you do. Okay.
I do, Senator, and thank you for that question, because even when with working with Senator Marsh on the revised substitute bill, as a lawyer, if you don't want people to pick and choose or even try to misinterpret the statute, we don't put it in the statute. So regardless of whether may or shall is either mandatory or not mandatory, as if we're in the process of proposing legislation, I don't want any potential legislation that someone in the public may think that the GEC may be required to do something, even though the language says may. My job is to protect potential litigants, and as you guys know, from 2018, we've had 3 lawsuits that we've had to defend. Although most of them have been dismissed and without merit, it still costs money for the Guam Election Commission to defend against these positions because other individuals want to challenge language in the statute, whether it's may or shall. And so, while I appreciate and the commission understands the whole issue of voting centers, first of all, the voting center issue has been discussed, and the Guam Election Commission has instructed the staff to come up with a plan, not necessarily for this election cycle, but in the future election cycle, because there are so many issues that require a lot of detail. For example, one of the big ones is security. It's not even the procurement issue. In the code currently, once the ballots are issued to the precinct officials, those ballots have to have a precinct official with those ballots 24 or as long as those ballots are in the custody. And so, we have to figure out a location where once the voting centers get closed, the ballots are secure. I mean, this is protecting, if the ballots are left in a building, what is the security that the Guam Election Commission needs to secure to ensure the public that there's no compromise in those voting centers with regard to ballots. And even if you do have security, what is the security within the security to make sure those ballot boxes cannot be tampered with, even inside the voting center that's secured? So those are the types of details that require a lot of work for the staff. And I know they've been working and looking at other jurisdictions in the United States with how they're taking the security measures into place to ensure the sanctity of the ballots and that the security of those ballots, so that the public has no concern once they go in there that their ballot is safe and secure and will be counted at the same time.
Thank you, Vince. Maria, then just to summarize, if no primary election, would this be an option that you would like to see for the general election?
Yes, we can. We can look at it if there is no primary.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Morton. Senator Luis Muñoz, and you'll be followed by Senator Torres and then Senator Kelly March-Titano.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to the GEC for obliging us. I know you have a lot of work to do, and we keep taking you away from it. But thank you so much for being here. Maria, has the GEC ever had a remote early voting before?
In 2010
2010?
was the most recent early voting.
Were there any issues with that remote voting?
Yes, ma'am. It was, so the biggest thing was, I wasn't there. The biggest thing was it was understaffed, and people were coming, there were long lines all the time.
Okay.
And 2010 was a, very hot and heavy contested election.
That was also a gubernatorial election as well, right?
I'm sorry?
It was also a gubernatorial election
Yes,
as well?
yes.
Okay, so it was more magnified because of that? It was more magnified because...
Senator, I was talking to the staff this morning. It seems like we talk about the gubernatorial elections increasing voter participation. But as we look closer at the numbers, mayoral elections where there's contests creates or increases voter participation as well.
Okay, thank you very much, thank you. So you also mentioned that GPD is usually the one who guards the ballots after it leaves the voters' hands and it goes into the boxes. Now, if this were to happen as well, would we need to have GPD 24/7 to watch the polling sites and then guard the boxes for wherever you may be putting them overnight after the polling sites close, the remote sites close?
Just so long as the ballots are not at GEC. I know that the 14 of us said, yes, we'll have cameras, but we'll also have GPD.
So we wouldn't probably be taking them away from other things that they could possibly be best doing rather than guarding ballot boxes. You also mentioned the importance of protecting those ballots. Do you recommend or even foresee that we should include like a criminal or maybe a civil penalty in case there's a mishandling of the ballots or the boxes?
That's covered. We have one whole chapter in the election code that covers the criminal offenses.
Including the remote
Yes,
locations?
yes.
Okay. In the polling places, you have different precincts, right? So if we were to do a remote polling place, would you have to divide the boxes in precincts?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I would like this body to understand that at one vote center, everybody can go vote at that one vote center. We will have ballots available there for the people from Malesu, Umatak, the people from Jigu, and the people from Dededo.
Okay, so they can go to,
Yes.
anyone can go to any of those remote locations? Okay.
Yes.
How would they distinguish which area would they have, of course, I mean, if you can help me understand, say, for example, I went to a northern, and I was going to vote, maybe I normally vote in the central area. Can I just say I'm from this village and I'm going to vote for this? No? Okay.
No. You will present just like at the regular polling place on election day, you present your validly issued photo ID.
Okay.
They will check your name on the roster, and in the vote centers, possibly a poll book, and we will confirm that you are registered in that voting district.
Okay.
You will then be issued a ballot based on your last name for that precinct inside that voting district.
Okay. Forgive me because I'm just trying to see how the big picture, what it will look like, because I've never experienced it. So thank you for that answer. Do you have any idea what these remote polling places could cost to operate?
Probably the biggest cost, again, in most endeavors is human resources. And again, it'll take some time. We have a big learning curve. No, I don't have an idea. We can go and punch some numbers out. We didn't try it early on when we were discussing them.
Okay. not even a rough number, maybe 10, 20,000?
Yes, Tom reminded me that when we looked at it, running one vote center for 30 days is almost equivalent to the cost of one election.
Thank you for that. What?
Dispensa to, sorry. I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. Would you mind repeating that?
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, if you
Yes,
don't mind.
yes,
Marie.
please, Ms. Benglin.
Senator Kelly, running a vote center for 30 days, was it 30 or 2 weeks? Okay, sorry. We looked at running a vote center, Senator Kelly and Senator Luis, for 2 weeks. And is equivalent to running the election on one day, the cost.
One vote center, right? One vote center, and then here there would be three different.
I caution this body about 3 vote centers. We think that, because Tanana from Umata can vote in Jigo if she's staying with her granddaughter there, one vote center, it won't take, everybody drives to the polling site. Nobody walks to the polling site.
And that's for 2 weeks, so if we do this for 30 days, that we're looking at a lot of money, a lot of money. Thank you very much for that. Also, my final question is in regards to registration. So if somebody went within that 30 days, could they go to the remote voting site and say, can I register here, and then just vote there? Or how would you work in the registration as well too?
Just like regular in office right now, if a person comes in on July 30th to vote, if that person is not registered to vote, just so long as it's not 10 days before or 9 days before the election, that person with the application for an absentee ballot doubles as registration.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That was my final question. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Torres, and you'll be followed by Senator Marsh. And I see other colleagues raise their hand. I have Senator Castro, and then I see Senator Tello, and then Senator Sabina. All right, so please keep in mind the flow. Senator Torres, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Pangilinan, for being here and for answering our questions. Based on your GEC's election comparative analysis report of 2010, there were about 80 to 100 votes per day for the absentee ballots. And I think it states 2,900 for the primary and about 3,700 for the general election. You also discussed briefly that in 2010 there was a lot of complaints made. And in fact, subcommittee was empaneled at the GEC to investigate a lot of these complaints by voters and precinct officials. And one of the main problems was the storage of a large number of early in-office ballots that was questioned by the GEC subcommittee. And a resolution was put forward referencing the commission's findings. And at the time, among them, there was issues with the ballots being stored, secure storage of the ballots cast in the early voting period may have been compromised. Other issues include having family members present there, and that, again, it was a compromising of the ballots there. They also had an issue about whether the ballots that were stored were carried to the precincts or if they were carried by the director directly to the tabulation center. So at the time, and you mentioned at the time, there was understaffing, and that was one of the issues. But we also know that at that period, because it was a very contested race, there was enough of absentee voters to overload your system and to cause a lot of these errors that led to an investigation. Now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, health emergency, and we're contemplating adding to that number of centers that you can vote early to include, and early, by the way, for everybody, early means 30 days. Once it starts, it's like 30 days before the election, right? So it's that whole period that you'll have these. We can expect a large number. I mean, would it be safe to say that the number of voters, if you now get rid of the rules for qualifying and just say anybody can, would that number like triple, do you think, of absentee voters?
Point of personal privilege. This is on the amendment.
Okay, well, I'm getting there. I'm just setting the groundwork. So if I may continue.
It's sounding like the main body
Okay,
of the
yeah,
bill.
I'm speaking to the sanctity of the ballots, and I'm just preferencing it based on historical information based on prior election in 2010 that resulted in an extensive number of ballots in the early voting that resulted in issues with the compromising of the ballots. So given the circumstances now, we're in the middle of a COVID, and we're contemplating now having more than one area to vote. If the GEC were to receive a large number of mail-in or in-office ballots under the scenario of this amendment to a bill, you mentioned
Point
that
of
you've
inquiry
rectified.
is
May I?
the amendment is about voting centers, so I don't
Senator Kelly,
understand how
Senator Kelly,
in
let her
office.
Senator Kelly,
She can't speak.
stand fast, okay?
Yeah,
Let Senator Torres finish because
Yes.
she's giving the scenario, and I believe she was leading to her question. Senator Torres, please complete. A reminder to all my colleagues, we're talking about the amendment. I was waiting for that question to come up, Senator Kelly. Let's not nip it, and let's let our colleagues complete. Ma'am, please continue.
If I may. Thank you. Mrs. Pangilinan, if the GEC were to receive a large number of in-office ballots as a result of anything, where would these ballots be stored, and how would you ensure security up until the reconciliation process? So I'm speaking specifically to how would, assuming we're going to now open it up and have everybody avail of the ability to vote in this way through these added centers, what would those measures be to ensure the security of those ballots, the integrity of the ballots up until the reconciliation process?
Senator Torres, let me just remind you, we're talking about the amendment about the voting centers. That's the questions that will be allowed to the panel.
But okay, but
So
I
understand, it is a good question, but we're only talking about the amendment, ma'am.
But the voting centers will result in more ballots coming in, and my question is just, can we preserve the sanctity of the ballots? Other people spoke about the sanctity of the ballots. That's all this is. Are you confident that if we were to increase the numbers as a result of this, the sanctity of the ballots will be preserved? That's fair, isn't it?
Senator Torres, I announced earlier.
If I could point out, one is for the primary and one is for the general.
Senator Kelly, relax. I was made it very clear in the very beginning, my colleagues, we're going to talk about the amendment, only the amendment. Your question is good, but we're only talking about amendment. Let's stick to just the amendment. You have a valid question. I have no problem with it, but it's not on the amendment. We have to talk about the amendment.
But is the result of having a center the collection of votes? And why is it not relevant? It is absolutely relevant. If you open up more centers, you will have more votes. I'm just asking, is there any issue with securing those ballots?
Senators,
Why is that not valid?
I've asked the panel, and it would apply. Senator, Ms. Pangilinan.
Senator Mary, that is the main concern of the Guam Election Commission when there is a vote center outside or far away from the Guam Election Commission.
It's a giha ufafaisin. And that siguro na all the issues that we experienced in 2010, you can assure will be rectified if we were to have a surge, because 2010 was in fact a situation that resulted in a surge of votes in the absentee. It's a giha ufafaisin. Situas maasi, Mrs. Pangilinan.
Thank you, Senators. You wanted to say something additional, Ms. Pangilinan? Please do.
Senators, when the GEC staff were discussing vote centers, we started with 30 days. But because of the security of the ballots, we said 2 weeks going Monday through Saturday, or Tuesday through Saturday with long hours was much better and less risky than going 30 days. So just so you all know, that's one of our bigger areas of concern with vote centers.
Okay. Senator Mars-Tithon, do you have a question for the panel?
Suzuis Masi, Mr. Chair. So we've talked about that you are not sure that there is time without a primary to develop a vote center plan, and there is definitely not enough time with a primary. Is the vote centers a full laid out plan, or how far along are you with that plan?
We don't have anything in writing. We have notes from all the different staffers in their areas. We're not that far along with any plan for the vote center.
So with that, has this been brought before the commission, and would it still have to go through that step of going through the commission after you develop the plan?
Yes, ma'am.
So even if we write it in legislation, it would still have to go before, with a May, it still has to go before the commission and be approved, which at this point is something I assume you cannot guarantee.
I cannot speak for the board.
Has the commission, in their discussions, have they brought up any concerns? And if so, what are those concerns?
Actually, Senator, the board is waiting for us to put plans together. With regard to this bill, early on, the board requested that we put together a chapter. With our legal counsel, we're supposed to put together a chapter not only for this emergency, but to address all emergencies. And the last thing that our board said, with advice of legal counsel, that it's best addressed in a separate chapter outside of Chapter 10, Absentee Voting.
So just last week, we were looking at a couple of bills, and we determined it was important to have a public hearing and to get public input. Vote Centers has not had a public hearing. It has not gotten really public input. People were not called in to provide public input. Do you see the value of getting community input?
Thank you for always letting us know or involving us. Yes, the voters, we want them to come out. Of course, they should have a voice in that, in whether we should have vote centers or not. Senator. Vote centers were touched upon during the public hearing of Bill number 330, if you remember.
That's why I distinguished that people were not called forward to give input. One person's response to somebody else's comment is not calling forward the public, but I appreciate that. I did see that in the committee report, and I was there at the public hearing. So please don't count that as my time, because I'm just responding to her. Do we have the machines for voting centers in place at this time?
Vote centers can be implemented with or without machines. It depends on what we have at that point in time.
Is that the direction you're leaning in, or is it still open right now in your research?
There's something that we are looking into. There's a piece of machine that works with our new tabulation equipment. They're called Ballot on Demand. So there's a way to make sure that we are held accountable. So that's one piece of equipment that we're looking into.
If you went in that direction, would you be able to get them out here in time for the general election, get the plan in place, get the voting machines here? And I think there's a law about having machines be manned.
The ballot on demand does not involve the voter. The ballot on demand is operations inside GEC on how we produce or get the ballot to the voter.
And you had mentioned in response to a former senator's question about security, and of course security is important. You had mentioned that it's once you're getting out of the office and these voting centers that the real concern is there. Can you outline in a further detail the difference between the security of in-office voting ballots? We had talked about those multi-layers, but if you could outline the difference about the security in the office versus when they become more of a concern outside of the office.
Okay. First and foremost, if we were to implement vote centers like the way the nation is doing, Senator Kelly would go vote on her ballot, and you will cast the ballot directly into the ballot box. If you voted in office today, you will, again, fill out an application form for the absentee ballot, sign an affidavit, envelope, vote your ballot, put your ballot in your ballot envelope, seal that ballot envelope, put your ballot envelope in the affidavit envelope, seal that affidavit envelope. At the end of the day, every day for 30 days, the staff reconciles how many ballots we use, how many ballots are left over against the logbook, against the application forms, against the registry. Okay, so inside, in-office voting, those ballots at the end of the night after reconciliation gets put in a fireproof cabinet that's locked, with the keys locked in my office, with security cameras right either at the vault or at the fireproof cabinets.
So is there a difference between your cabinet and a vault? We had spoken about a vault. Could you explain the vault then?
We are setting up, we have a vault, and the vault is locked, and nobody goes in there by himself or herself. Two of us go in all the time. We also have fireproof cabinets with the number of absentee ballots we get. Fireproof cabinets are locked, keys are in our office, and those fireproof cabinets are locked every night with the absentee ballots in them.
Those are my questions for this first round. Sudos Maasi.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Will is going to yield his question. So we'll proceed to Senator Tello, and then we'll go to Senator Pidu, and then Senator Sabina, and then the Speaker. Okay? A reminder, 2 rounds, 5 minutes per questions, not including the response. So if your question is only 10 seconds, it's only 10 seconds of your 5 minutes, okay? So don't look at your clock and signal me. Senator Tello.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, could I have Senator Castro move to the right, please? To his right so I can see the panel. I can't see them. Yeah, just your big head move to the right. Oh, there, the left is fine too as well. Okay. So thank you so much for being here. Hi, Maria and Vince. It's so good to see you, and Tom. I really appreciate coming down here, but most especially, I appreciate you taking our calls, especially when we have a question. And I think this was very important. We did talk about it earlier. One of the biggest things I think that we're having problems with, that I think the GEC is having an issue with, is finding individuals to man precinct officials. I know it's 335 plus the 150, making it 485. Of the 300 applicants that you have, you're probably assessing that 20% of that would drop off. In past history, that's always happened. So right now, we are short not only the 485 we need considerably, not being able to hire, but if these call centers came into place, what is the additional amount of employees or individuals that you have to hire to be able to man this? I know the cost is astronomical already, but how many additional bodies do you need in order to have this?
The number of employees is dependent on how many vote centers we have.
Well, the amendment says 3.
3.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have an exact number. I would think if we're going to man it 6 days a week, those long hours, we probably have to have at least 2 shifts. And the big challenge for me is those vote centers must be supervised at all times by the full-time permanent GEC staff. That's my biggest problem. With regard to how many, possibly 10 for 2 shifts. And that's a very rough number.
For one center?
For one vote center.
Okay,
yes.
So you're looking at 30 additional bodies for these 3
yes.
call centers. Okay.
But Senator,
Yeah.
we probably we can pull from the precinct official pool if they're not working, because the precinct officials will only work on election day.
That's right. That's right. It's almost like hiring It's almost like hiring new employees, actually, to do it for 30 days. It's not just precinct officials where they get stipends, and then if you're hiring individuals, even if it's on temporary, it's well, hence Tom and doing the math, very costly. I'm mistaken. Was it about $350,000 for 2 weeks? Because if you're saying 2 weeks only was estimated. So times 2, that's 30. Okay, well, we know it's well over $1 million to run these call centers. And I thank you so much, too, for bringing up the importance of security of the ballots. I think that's one of the biggest issues here. I mean, that's where you're going to run into litigation. You have these centers up, and it's going to be difficult. And I definitely don't want to have to see you spend your money at the Guam Election Commission for litigation. It's probably, but if and it was mentioned earlier, and about the may to the shall, and I think Attorney Camacho, you hit it on the nail. I mean, if it's no intention of doing it, then why even have this amendment, or even why even have the may or shall if there's no intention whatsoever? So my question is, Very simple. Can you do this? Can the Guam Election Commission do what this amendment is requiring? Just plain and simple, can you do this?
With the upcoming primary election, no.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Pito Terlaya, and you're followed by Senator Sabina Perez.
Thank you, Lejo. I thought that I was going to be the first in line because of my age, but that's okay. And before I share some of my thoughts, Mr. Chair, I just want to thank the panel. I want to thank the legal counsel. I want to thank Maria for doing a very good job, and I want to thank the member of GEC. My question is very simple. Madam Director, ang dangklo na si Diyos mga si sunguna magagang mo sa tunga no gosbisiolo necesaryo na tafan ali tafan asuda hinasuguni sa tanadin ansimo na tolo. Madam Chair, with the amendments that is being proffered in reference to having at least 3 different locations, do you, in your most honest opinion, do you think it's practical or impractical to agree with the amendment considering the timeline and other requirements such as additional employees, training, bidding process, security, and maybe ballot protection? Do you think, in your honest opinion, that we can go forth with the timeline that we have and the things that GEC needs to do to accommodate what we're asking here? Do you think that it's practical or impractical to agree with this amendment? Thank you, Madam Director.
With the upcoming primary election, it's not possible for Guam Election Commission to take up the vote center project.
And I would also think that even if we don't have the primary election, GEC is going to be going around like a chicken without a head, because there's just so many things that you guys need to do. And, I guess that's why we call you in, so that we can be fair on making that decision in as far as passing this amendment. Thank you, Madam Director.
Thank you, Senator Pito. Senator Sabina Perez, do you have a question, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Maria, Vince, and Tom for being here. I'm not in support of this amendment, so, but I just wanted to ask regarding, safety. That was one of the rationales behind this amendment, was to provide more space for voters, so that they're not congregating in places. And judging from your experience from the joint election, what are some takeaways as far as ensuring, spacing, social distancing? What are some of the measures that can be done to ensure that, voting is done safely?
Rather than having all 30,000 to 55,000 voters congregating on one day over 13 hours, we will give them a choice to come during the 2 weeks. With regard to vote centers, in terms of the preventive COVID-19 measures, we will instill that at the vote centers, of course, while there's still the spread of COVID going around. Right now, what we know is the temperature taking, asking the questions, hand sanitizing, mask requirement, and bring your own pen. And if, again, even at the vote center, we anticipate doing curbside voting. Senator, just like Senator DeTeresa's question about the venue, we need to go look, and we need to make sure that the building that we can go in is ADA compliant. We need to make sure that it's safe where people can drive in and drive out. Those are the issues. Those are what we will look for when we are planning the vote centers.
Right. Just one more thing. It says notwithstanding the administrative adjudication law. Do you think that's necessary to waive that in regards to, or what are some of the impacts of that if you waive that, the AAA process in creating rules for voting districts?
Ma'am, we do not ever want to waive the AAA process. Vote is a fundamental right of the voters. We want to hear their concerns. Back in 2012, I think it was 2012, when we put our election manual together and the reform of the election code, we made sure we reached out to our voters to get their input.
Thank you. No further questions.
Senator Castro, do you have any questions, sir? None. Madam Speaker, do you still have that question, or did someone else already answer it, ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, my question was answered earlier. I want to thank Mrs. Pangilinan, Attorney Camacho, and Mr. San Agustin for being here. And my question was asking about the feasibility and the financial breakdown and where we could go from here. But maybe even a bigger question is based on the bill in general and the feasibility to giving the opportunity, because of what we're going through with this pandemic, is it feasible to address this bill in general at this time?
With the upcoming primary election, Madam Speaker, ahi.
It's an ahi, right?
No.
But for the general?
No, ma'am. For the general?
Not.
None. Yeah. Are you asking about the amendment or the bill?
No, I'm asking about the general bill, for Bill 330 in general.
With regard to the bill.
In general.
The bill in general,
Only because as we're working on the amendment and looking at the feasibility, we know that there are major concerns, and you talked about that. I was going to ask also about the breakdown of the voting centers and the cost of it, right? And you brought up the fact that it's going to cost as much as it is as if we had one election, right? One full day of election. So my take to you is, and I'm envisioning that because of the amendment in general, is it feasible to look at the merits in general?
So, Madam Speaker, with regard to Bill 330, that's what you're asking?
Yes.
Me. With regard to Bill 330, if the amendment stands at May, yes, it is feasible to implement Bill 330. Take out the amendment.
Thank you.
Take out the amendment.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just
Thank you.
again want to thank the Guam Election Commission for being here after the hours of communicating with us and working closely with us. I think we just want to make sure that the opportunity for people to go out and vote and making sure that they're safe, that all those protocols and guidance are in place. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There is only two of our colleagues that didn't ask any question. Would you like to ask a question? None. Does any of my colleagues would like to ask a question on the second round? Do you have any questions other than what was asked? Would you like to start? Senator Therese Terlai.
Sure, thank you,
You will
Mr.
begin,
Chair.
ma'am.
All right, so you're estimating that the cost of one voting center is equal, for 2 weeks, is equal to the cost of an election, an entire election. You estimated the cost of the primary to be about 420 or something. What about a general? Is it the same cost?
The cost of the general goes down by a little bit. In preparing for the primary, Senator, we're also kind of preparing for the general.
Okay. Does early voting in office create an additional cost?
Yes, ma'am. If we're anticipating the cost of the envelopes and the cost of manpower goes up with that, ma'am?
How is that?
The cost of manpower? Because we will open later to accommodate the voters. And then we will need additional people because we want them to, the additional people will man the in-office voting. We will just have our permanent employees supervise. And we do have money because we are doing in-office voting without excuse because of the pandemic. We do have a CARES grant that will take care of the additional costs for in-office voting.
That was my next question. So with these additional costs, you talked about a $600,000 grant
Yes.
for CARES for the elections, but you also talked about having allocated that to an additional 150 employees for the primary even, so, and some PPEs and safety equipment, but what do you have left for anything else we add on, such as in-office voting?
As we've begun, last week we began adding up all the costs. We didn't put in the costs. We started putting in the costs of in-office voting without excuse. I don't have a I don't have a good number. I can get that to you, ma'am.
All right. So the difference between an office and a voting poll, I mean a regular voting place, is that you have envelopes and you have notaries. So plus like I guess your regular employees are busy with preparing for the regular elections, and you have to get additional, like polling people to watch them do their ballots, all of that. All right. If we open a surge center and we have a vote, today. Okay. If we open up a voting center as described in the amendment, and we have a surge of voters as you described that you had in your office in 2010, you said at that time you were understaffed and there were long lines. Are we able to avoid that in a voting center with any money you might have left over from your CARES money or your COVID grants?
There are very many unknowns, all right? So just so you know that we continue to think this out, one of the possibilities of a venue would be the field house. That's one of the possibilities. Last week when we were talking, I contacted the field house and checked on its availability. They always have for us August 29th and November 3rd. Tentatively they said if you want the first 2 weeks or the last 2 weeks in August, let us know. So with regard to the cost, I can get back to you if it's still feasible. And again, I stress, if we still have a primary, please we want you to know that a vote center is not feasible for the general.
To hire 30 employees for a vote center, 10 employees for a vote center, 30 for 3 vote centers, what would 10 employees cost you?
Ma'am, I'd have to go back and talk because we don't only hire them for the first 2 weeks. We have training involved.
Oh.
We have to have them be familiar with the ballots, how to give the instructions to the ballots. I don't know right now.
Would a vote center require affidavits and notaries?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we would put our ballots directly into the box, be done, okay. Would it be more feasible to do that and in-house, okay, never mind that, I'm not gonna go there, but to train 450 employees before the primary, you said that GEC needs to train for 6 days a week to get that many employees done. Do you need to retrain them before the general?
Yes, ma'am. And one of the objectives when we retrain them from the general, we hope to get returnees,
Yes.
and we want to hear directly from them.
Okay. How soon will you have the additional 150 to 180 employees that you need right now for a primary?
Okay, so we have our list going. We're anticipating starting training on the 27th. We've trying to maximize the training by recording training videos and putting it up on our website.
No, but how soon will you be able to hire the additional 150?
Okay, so they get paid, the 150?
Yes.
Okay, so what we'll do is we continue to get applications for precinct officials. And so as we do that, we will pull from where there's we will pull from the pool of precinct officials, and from there we will get the 150. Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Repeat that.
So we have a pool for precinct officials.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
We continue to receive applications for them.
Mm-hmm.
What we'll do, the first thing we have to do is train the precinct officials. You're asking me how soon do we hire them?
Right.
Once we start the training, at the end of the training, we'll swear them in. By the way, they all get paid stipends.
Okay, per day.
So, for the day, yeah. So we will, I guess it's when they come to training, that's when.
All right. Well, my question more geared towards, how feasible is it for us to hire additional personnel for these voting centers? If you had said at the public hearing that you were having a hard time filling the 335 that you needed for the primary, first of all, you're still trying to fill those, and you need to fill, in addition to that extra the 35 regular, an additional 150 because of COVID. And so, yeah, but you're saying you have a pool, so is it difficult to recruit these, or is it easy? I mean, how soon can you get the 150 secured?
Oh, for the
primary.
For the primary?
Yes.
Senator, those people will be only employed, will work for us for only the 1 day. So
Right.
we continue to pick up applicants for the precincts, and then we will train them after we train the precinct officials.
All right, so are you no longer having a hard time finding people to serve as precinct officials?
We are accepting them. Everywhere I go, I encourage people to apply.
All right. What is, you said at one point that you might have to increase the incentive for these officials. Is that because of COVID? And have you decided on that? Does that, I guess that goes back to how much money do we have left from this COVID grant that you received to apply towards a voting center or any other thing we might look at?
The budget for the CARES grant is being put together as we speak. We've put a column for all the costs that are funded by our local appropriation, and then we are putting a column for all of the CARES fund grant. So we are getting to that. I don't have it right now. We can get back to you. We know that for the incentive pay, or actually the hazard pay, the equivalent of hazard pay, we're looking at anywhere from $50, right? Oh yeah, okay, thank you. So it's $52,000 total for the added incentive or hazard pay for the precinct officials.
All right, do you have, it might sound repetitive, but please forgive me. So if we're trying to open a voting center to prevent, large congregations on voting day, can we prevent these large congregations at the voting center or in-house voting, like you described in 2010?
One of the ways that we are looking at, Senator, is to schedule the people coming in. We will open, I know we want to open 6 days a week. We will open late. The latest we will open is 7 o'clock. So we still have to set those up. Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we reconcile every night. So we need time for that. So Saturday may be a shorter time. So based on our calculations right now, it seems like based on the hours we have available, based on on how long the process takes, we may be able to handle up to 5,000 voters during the 30 days.
For 30 days, so what is that per day? What are you estimating? $60? $600?
I'm sorry, Senator, it was, we can do 8 to 10 at a time. And how many during the day? We did I'm sorry, Senator, we did the numbers last night. And we will open 6 days a week.
All right, so if we're saying 5,000 in 30 days, that means about, wait.
I'm not sure the number, but we're coming up with about 166. I'm not sure.
Per day, 166?
Per day, yeah.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, 166. If we just do 5,000 divided by 30 days, 166. Okay. All right. Are you confident we can keep people safe?
We're not going to open on Sundays, so it's not really 30 days.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there anything else? You're good now, Senator Treese? Moving along, do you have a question, Senator Kelly? Give you a shot. This is your second and last round. Go for it. Then Senator Moylan will follow.
Seduis Masi, Mr. Chair. So just to make a couple of things clear, because I just feel like maybe a couple of things got a little muddled, and clarity is always better, right? Better to say it twice. So for the record, Bill 330 currently does not include vote centers. That amendment of adding vote centers in has not been accepted. Only the amendment to the amendment, the word may, is the only thing that's been accepted. So I just wanted to make that clear. And also to clarify, so Bill 330, without the amendment as it stands, you had answered the speaker and said it is feasible.
That's correct.
Seduis Masi. With the CARES Act money, now this amendment looks at no less than 3 voting centers. The CARES Act monies, you've stated before, is enough for both the primary and the general elections to the best of your understanding at this point. If we're expanding it to 3 voting centers, would the CARES Act money still be enough to cover 3 voting centers in the way that you've described their expenses?
If you remember, a vote center will cost about as much as the election. It's only $600,000. We've already expended or encumbered about $52,000 for precinct officials alone. We still have supplies to buy. for both the primary and the general.
So in order to kind of summarize the different points, so if there is not enough time if we have a primary to develop the plan, it is not guaranteed enough time even without a primary. Securing the ballots has been a main concern. The plan is not, it's in its early stages. It's not even written yet, nothing in writing yet. It must still be presented before the board. And at this point, there is no understanding if the board will be approving it. And so what this final point is, if it's the 3 vote centers, it would be more costly and the CARES Act would not be enough to cover it.
That's correct, and Senator Kelly, may I plead with you that if you consider vote centers, make it only 1.
So, Mr. Chair, I just ask for the rest of my time, just in case any last question comes up.
Now, okay, good choice to reserve, but that was it. Senator Moylan. And does anyone else would like to ask a question after Senator Moylan? None? Senator Moylan would be the last. Senator Moylan, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Maria, again, for your information. So the cost of an election, and when I'm trying to relate it to the voting center, the cost of an election is what you said it would cost for a voting center. So would I use $400,000 as a cost for the election? Would that be correct?
Over $400,000.
All right. Over, okay. If I took the less 400,000 and I have 3 voting centers, that's 1.2 million. Okay. And you have less than 600,000 in the CARES. So where would you go for the rest of the money?
You, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Pangilinan.
Senator.
Thank you.
Senator, inside the Election Code of Guam, it specifies that the cost of election should be appropriated by the Guam Legislature based on a detailed budget submitted by the Guam Election Commission directly to the Guam Legislature.
Thank you, Mrs. Pangilinan, and hopefully we can have that detailed budget put at DOA. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Amanda, you have a question, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your time, especially because this is such a busy time for all of you. And I know we all share the same goal of making voting as accessible as possible, and now during this COVID-19 crisis, as safe as possible. So I wanted to ask you, Ms. Pangilinan, Mr. San Agustin, if you could provide a breakdown of what that estimate is for these voting centers. So I know you mentioned that it would be the cost of an election, but are we including in this estimate the cost of rent, the cost of overtime, the cost of precinct officials? Okay, so this is assuming that we are paying to rent out a space, and that would be the biggest chunk of that cost. So there is a possibility that it would not cost as much as an actual election if we were to use an existing government building like a school or a mayor's office, a room in one of those spaces, like we usually would for an election.
Again, Senator Shelton, Senator Amanda, you know, the cost of leasing a building for a year, right? That's a typical request. But the cost of requesting for just 30 days, I'm sure that cost goes up. When we were looking at it just on the surface, we have to be careful because you had mentioned that the cost of the rent would be the biggest cost. It's not. It's the cost of human resources.
Okay.
to get the vote center going, we have to train new people. In the training, we probably need it over a couple of months at least.
Okay, understand. Thank you very much.
The schools will probably not be available, Senator Mandev.
Okay. And so I know one of the suggestions that you just told one of my colleagues is that if we are really considering these vote centers, to make it only one vote center. And so in the very preliminary plans that you have now, where would you suggest that this vote center be?
So like I mentioned, I don't know if it was just a week ago or a couple weeks ago, one of the venues we were exploring was the University of Guam Fieldhouse. We know that's where our election return center is, so we just stay there and then on election day open. One of the things that I wanted to bring up too is, should you want to proceed with the vote center for 2022, okay? Not for 2020. One of the things to talk about is, so we opened the vote center 2 weeks. On election day, we continue the vote center.
It becomes another precinct on the election day. Okay. Thank you very much for that answer. And whether or not this amendment moves forward and vote centers become something tangible in the 2020 general election, I think there's still a lot of work for us to do to make sure that moving forward, as we know, the coronavirus we're not out of the woods yet. We still need to think about our safety and just the different picture that we have in the world today for every future election. So I'm sure we'll be working very closely together. I appreciate everyone's time today and all of the work you put into this. Sujus Masi.
Thank you. No further questions. The panel, Senator Therese.
Could I just follow up on something said earlier? You said that for a voting center, no notaries would be required, but notaries are required for in-house voting, early voting, not just absentee, but early voting under this bill, right?
Okay.
I know that without a notary, it will be faster at the voting center, right? Because notary, you have to take that extra time to notarize. But, and I was really very cautious, trying to make sure this bill does not take out any notary requirement. But I'm just trying to figure out now why it's required for a person walking into your office and not required for a person who walks into a voting center. I know in the villages when we vote, you know, they call out our names so that anybody around who's witnessing can say that's not her or something like that. So if you could explain.
That would be the same process at the vote center. We will invite the parties to bring poll watchers there, and your name will be called as you come up to vote.
Okay, so kind of in place of a notary security, we've got poll watchers calling out your name as security.
I think what's important to understand, Senator, is the process that happens at the on-site voting. The ballots do not go into the ballot box. And so they're separated until the day of the election is when they get sorted and goes to the precinct. And so in order to maintain, because during the first 2 weeks of in-house voting, the voter registration is still ongoing. So the final rosters have not been finalized and will not be finalized until 10 days before. So in order to allow people to vote and be able to account for those votes, those have to be placed in a secret envelope and then the affidavit envelope so that when those come out, they're able to cross those names off the roster. So that's the reason why there's a notary to ensure that the sanctity of the ballot is protected and the process to make sure that every ballot is counted the night of election. It gets crossed off the roster.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. That completes all the questions, unless you're going to ask for clarification of a question that was asked earlier. There being none, the panel is now dismissed unless you have anything else you wanted to bring up. Nothing else? Thank you very much. We will be on a short 2-minute recess. My colleagues, we are returned from the recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. We are now on the amendment. I will remind everyone or advise everyone that we will stick with the rules of speaking on the amendment, just like speaking on the bill. There's only 4 colleagues that have not spoken. Senator Mander, you want to speak on your already? Okay. Yes, but Madam Speaker, there are 4 colleagues here that have not spoken on the amendment. Those 4 will be the only one allowed. We're sticking with the same rules as if we were ready, okay? And then there are so many that have not spoken on the bill. As we move along, that's how we're going to be managed, okay? So I will start with, I will identify my colleagues that haven't spoken first before you speak, okay? So that at least I announce them.
Okay.
Okay? There are Senator Moylan has not spoken on the amendment. Senator, Madam Speaker, Tina Munoz Barnes has not spoken on the amendment. Senator Clint Ridgell has not spoken on the amendment. And Senator Mary Camacho Torres has not spoken on the amendment. Okay? But the author of the amendment would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I again want to thank the Guam Election Commission for coming here today and for sharing all of that information with us. After everything they shared today, especially considering the very, very big task that it will put on them so close to this election, and knowing the estimate of how much these vote centers will cost, and without a plan for us to move forward with them, I at this time would like to withdraw the amendment. And I know that several of our colleagues have shared their support of the intent of the amendment, and my plan moving forward is to work with the Guam Election Commission and our colleagues to proffer some kind of legislation for us to implement voting centers down the road. So I motion to withdraw the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Are there any objection to withdrawal? There being none, motion carries. Now we're back to the main motion with the bill, which is Substitute Bill 330-35. The following colleagues have not spoken on the motion. I will identify who you are so you know you can speak. On the main motion, okay? We have Senator James Moylan, Senator Luis Munoz, Speaker Tina Munoz Barnes, Senator Sabina Flores, Senator Clint Ridgell, Senator Telo Taitigui, and Senator Peter Terlai. Does anyone would like to speak on the main motion of my colleagues that have identified? There being none, Senator Sabina, would you like to speak? Please raise your hand higher. Thank you. You're it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a point of inquiry to the author of the bill regarding, is this considered an early voting type of bill?
Senator Kelly, would you like to yield to the question? Thank you.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chair, and for the question. So in my discussions, we did cover this with the Guam Election Commission, and they were very clear that early voting is its own category. This is a category of absentee voting, and within absentee voting, we are looking at one part of it. We're not touching the homebound voting. We're not touching the overseas voting. So it's its own specific category within the absentee voting.
So if I can ask a follow-up question, thank you for that. So it's not early voting, so it's 30-day in-office absentee voting period. When does that period begin and end?
The absentee period begins, let me just get to their website to just double check, but it should be July 30th to August 28th. But yes. So on their website, it says that it would be from July 30th to August 28th, both of 2020.
And this goes for all absentee ballots as well, in addition to this in-office voting? Is that the same period of time? Sorry, if I'd like to request if the author can yield to the question.
To Masi for the question. So as I understand it, some of the other absentee ballots, because they're off island and they're through the mail, they give them a 10-day window after the election for them to arrive. So it runs a little bit differently, but this one, the one that we're looking to expand, all occurs before the election, although everything is sealed as the executive director outlined until it's appropriate timing to open them.
Thank you. And then also another follow-up question. So when they tabulate these votes, is it at the same day of the election, or is it another time?
That is one question I did not ask. I know that they are sealed until the appropriate time. My understanding is that it is the same day as the election, but that's my understanding. But there is an appropriate time when they open it up, and it does have its accepted long-standing procedure. It's been in place for a very long time.
Okay, thank you. And so the in-office voting, I think in kind of connection to what they were presenting today, they were pretty confident that they can ensure the security of the votes if it's at the Guam election office. So I think that's good to know. So I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Burris. Does any other colleague would like to speak? There being none, Senator Kelly, would you like to close on your bill?
Siduas Maasi, Mr. Chair. So I take this time to ask my colleagues to truly consider that we are here today as leaders to protect both the democratic and sacred right to vote by doing what we have the ability to do, as well as to provide safe, feasible, and flexible options that allow all of us, no matter what boat we're in, the ability to vote in a manner that is conducive while we are contending with this global pandemic. Let us provide for the parents with children the flexibility of time to vote and not have to stress about childcare when the caregivers are also out voting on election day. Let us provide for those who are worried about their job security, who are worried to ask for time off for the ability to vote outside of their work schedule. Let us provide for those that are more vulnerable physically and for those who are worried and feeling stressed to be part of large crowds. The more of these types of options that we provide, we are empowering them to carry out their right to choose their future. The more we reduce the curbside voting lines, the more that we reduce the traditional polling lines, this expedites the process and it makes those polling sites safer. Each of these things are real and valid effects of COVID-19, and as I stated before, each of them needs to be addressed, not ignored, not minimized, and not swept under the rug. Each of these issues can severely compromise one's democratic and sacred right to vote for their leadership, for the values that they believe in, for the principles and priorities they want to see applied to their government. So again, I ask for everybody's true consideration on behalf of our community.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Kelly, you still have the floor.
Seduis Masi, Mr. Chair. I move to rise from the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation that Bill number 330-35, COR, as further substituted on the floor, to be placed on the third reading file, in the third reading file.
Are there any objection? There being none, we stand in recess.
Y mi 85 na legislature in Guahan is back from recess. Senator Joseph Augustine,
Thank
you
you,
are
ma-
recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to report back to the body that Bill 330-35 CR, as further substituted on the floor, was deliberated during the Committee of the Whole with a recommendation to place on the third reading file.
On the motion, are there any objections?
Madam Speaker, I'd like to amend that motion to rise and to add on that we immediately go into voting.
Object?
There's been an objection on that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and I'm going to
Could
ask.
just re-specify what it is, Madam Speaker. It's, his motion is to...
Senator, it's not debatable. One
I
moment.
know, I'm just restating the motion before we vote.
Yes, I was going to ask you to go ahead and do that, so please proceed.
Yes, it's, the current motion is to rise from the Committee of the Whole with a recommendation to place the bill on the third reading. And I want to amend that motion to add on and to go immediately into the voting file.
And I understand that
into
there's-
third reading to vote on the bill.
I understand that, Senator Chalahi, we have,
Madam Speaker, the motion was not to rise from the Committee of the Whole. That was already decided earlier when I was the committee chair. All I'm making is a motion and reporting back that is with the recommendation to place on the third reading file. That's all I'm reporting back.
Oh,
We need
sorry.
to settle that.
Okay, Madam Speaker, I take my motion back right now. So there's no motion on the floor?
I'm reporting back
we're-
the results of the Committee of the Whole.
All right. We're accept-
colleagues, we're going to take a minute recess to confer with the clerk. Y minuto 35 na la legislature in Guam is back from recess. Senator Joseph, I'm sorry, Senator Teresa Lai.
Yes, I withdraw that amendment to his motion. Madam Speaker, I would like to listen to the motion again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. On that motion to withdraw from Senator Teresa Lahi, no objection. Motion carries. Senator Joseph Augustine, please restate the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to report back to the body that Bill 330-35 COR as further substitute on the floor was deliberated with the recommendation to place on the third reading file. And that is the motion.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Senator Joseph Augustine, you still have the floor.
Madam Speaker, I ask the colleagues that we recess until tomorrow at 2 o'clock to vote on the two bills.
We will be in recess at 2 o'clock.